The bruises on Clara Winters' wrists had turned from purple to yellow-green, but they still throbbed when she reached for the flour sack in the general store, and she pulled her sleeves down quickly before anyone could see what her husband had left behind. It was August of 1872 in St. Louis, Missouri, and the heat made wearing long sleeves pure torture. But Clara had learned that some secrets were worth sweating for. She kept her eyes down as she paid for the supplies, counting out coins with trembling fingers while Mrs. Henderson prattled on about the new cattle drive coming through town. Clara barely heard her. All she could think about was getting home before Thomas noticed how long she had been gone. The walk back to the small house on the edge of town felt longer than usual. Clara's arms ached under the weight of the supplies, and sweat trickled down her spine beneath the high-necked dress she wore despite the summer heat. She could see other women in their short sleeves and light fabrics, fanning themselves on porches, and she envied them more than they could know. But envy was a sin, and Clara had enough to confess without adding that to the list. Thomas was waiting on the porch when she arrived, his bottle already half empty, though it was barely past noon. Clara's stomach clenched with familiar dread. "Took you long enough," he said, his words slurring slightly. "What were you doing? Talking to men?" "No, Thomas. Mrs. Henderson was telling me about the cattle drive. There was a line at the store." Clara kept her voice steady and calm, the way she had learned to do. Any hint of emotion could set him off. He stood up, swaying slightly, and Clara instinctively took a step back. The movement made his eyes narrow. "You stepping away from me? Your own husband?" "No, I just need to get these supplies inside. The butter will melt in this heat." It was the right thing to say. Thomas grunted and moved aside, letting her pass into the house. Clara released a breath she hadn't known she was holding and hurried to put the supplies away. Her hands shook as she worked, and she had to pause to steady herself against the counter. This couldn't go on. She knew it couldn't. But where could she go? Her parents were dead. Her brother had moved to California, and she had no money of her own. Thomas controlled everything. She was trapped as surely as a bird in a cage. That evening, Thomas passed out early, and Clara lay awake beside him, staring at the ceiling and listening to his snores. The moonlight streamed through the window, painting silver patterns on the floor. She thought about running. She had thought about it 100 times before, but where would she run to? And what would Thomas do if he found her? The next morning, Clara woke to find Thomas already gone. A note on the table said he had gone to the saloon and would be back for supper. Clara felt the tension ease from her shoulders. A whole day to herself. She decided to tend the small vegetable garden behind the house, one of the few things that brought her joy anymore. She was pulling weeds when she heard the sound of horses and shouting from the main street. Clara stood brushing dirt from her skirts and walked around to the front of the house to see what the commotion was about. A group of cowboys had ridden into town, their horses kicking up dust as they made their way down the street. The cattle drive Mrs. Henderson had mentioned, Clara realized. Most of the men looked trail-worn and exhausted, but one caught her attention. He sat tall in his saddle, his dark hair visible beneath his hat, and even from a distance Clara could see the easy confidence in the way he carried himself. As if sensing her gaze, he turned his head, and their eyes met across the distance. Clara felt her cheeks flush and quickly looked away, hurrying back behind the house. What was she thinking? Staring at a strange man like that? But even as she returned to her weeding, she couldn't shake the image of those eyes, clear and blue as a summer sky. The cowboy set up camp just outside town, and for the next few days St. Louis buzzed with activity. The men came into town for supplies and entertainment, filling the saloons and stores with their presence. Clara avoided the main street as much as possible, but Thomas seemed energized by the newcomers. He spent even more time at the saloon, coming home later and drunker than usual. On the third night, he came home in a rage. Clara was already in bed, but she heard him stumbling through the house, knocking things over and cursing. She lay perfectly still, hoping he would simply pass out, but instead he burst into the bedroom. "Get up!" he snarled. Clara sat up slowly, her heart pounding. "Thomas, what is wrong?" "What is wrong? I will tell you what is wrong. Lost money at cards. Those damn cowboys cleaned me out." He grabbed her arm and yanked her from the bed. "And it is your fault." "My fault? Thomas, I was not even there." "Do not talk back to me." His hand connected with her face, and Clara felt her lips split. She tasted blood. What followed was the worst beating Thomas had ever given her. Clara tried to protect herself, but he was too strong, too angry. He hit her, shoved her against the wall, grabbed her arm so hard she felt something crack. When he finally passed out on the floor, Clara dragged herself to the kitchen and collapsed against the cabinet, sobbing quietly so she wouldn't wake him. Her left wrist was swelling badly and pain radiated up her arm. Her face throbbed, and she could feel her eyes swelling shut. But worse than the physical pain was the realization that next time he might kill her. She had to leave. Tonight. Now. Before he woke up. Moving as quietly as possible despite her injuries, Clara gathered what little she could carry. She had no money, but she took some bread and dried meat, a canteen of water, and a shawl. Her hands shook as she tied the bundle together. Where would she go? She had no plan, no destination, but anywhere was better than here. She slipped out the back door into the cool night air and started walking. Every step sent pain shooting through her body, but she kept moving, heading away from town. She could hear music and laughter from the saloons in the distance, but she stayed in the shadows, terrified that someone would see her and tell Thomas. The cowboy camp was on the edge of town, and Clara meant to go around it, but in the darkness, she misjudged the distance. She suddenly found herself stumbling into the edge of their camp, and before she could retreat, a man stepped out of the shadows. "Who goes there?" His voice was calm but alert. Clara froze, her heart hammering. In the firelight from the camp, she could see it was the cowboy she had noticed before, the one with the blue eyes. "I am sorry," she whispered. "I did not mean to disturb you. I will go." She turned to leave, but her injured wrist buckled when she tried to adjust her bundle, and she dropped everything. Trying to pick it up in the darkness with shaking, injured hands proved impossible, and to her horror, Clara felt tears streaming down her face. "Madam, are you all right?" The cowboy moved closer, and Clara instinctively shrank back. But his voice was gentle, nothing like Thomas's. "I am not going to hurt you. Let me help you with that." He knelt down and gathered her scattered belongings, and as he did, the firelight fell across Clara's face. She saw his expression change as he took in her split lip and swollen eye. "Who did this to you?" His voice was still quiet, but there was an edge of steel in it now. "No one. I fell." The lie came automatically. "Madam, I have seen plenty of injuries in my time. You did not get those from falling." He stood up, holding her bundle carefully. "My name is William Barrett. Will, most folks call me, and I think you need help." Clara wanted to run, but she had nowhere to go, and her body was starting to fail her. The adrenaline that had gotten her this far was fading, and waves of pain and exhaustion washed over her. "I am Clara," she said quietly. "Clara Winters, and I cannot stay here. My husband will come looking for me." Will's jaw tightened. "Your husband did this." It was not a question. Clara did not answer, but she did not need to. The truth was written across her battered face, and in the way she held her injured wrist against her body. "Come with me," Will said. "We have a medical kit at camp. Let me at least look at your injuries." "I cannot. If Thomas finds me here, there will be trouble." "Let him try." There was quiet confidence in Will's voice that Clara had never heard before. Thomas's rages were loud and violent, full of sound and fury, but Will's calm certainty was somehow more powerful. "You are hurt and need help. Come sit by the fire and we will figure out what to do." Clara hesitated. But what choice did she have? She could not go back to Thomas. She had nowhere else to go. Slowly, she nodded. Will led her to the fire, where several other cowboys were sitting. They looked up in surprise as Will approached with Clara, and she saw their expressions change as they saw her injuries. "Boys, this is Mrs. Winters. She needs some help. Jake, bring the medical kit, would you?" An older cowboy with gray streaking his beard immediately stood and disappeared into one of the tents. The others made room by the fire, and Will gently helped Clara sit down. "Let me look at that wrist," he said softly. Clara hesitated, then slowly rolled up her sleeve. In addition to the fresh swelling from tonight, the yellow-green bruises from last week were still visible, along with older marks in various stages of healing. She heard one of the cowboys curse under his breath. Will's face remained calm, but his hands were incredibly gentle as he examined her wrist. "It might be broken," he said. "We need to wrap it at least, and you should see a doctor." "I cannot afford a doctor." "We will worry about that later." Jake returned with the medical kit, and Will carefully cleaned the cut on Clara's lip and the scrapes on her face. His touch was so gentle that Clara found herself relaxing slightly despite everything. "The bruises on your arms," Will said quietly. "How long has this been happening?" Clara looked away. 2 years since we married. And tonight? He lost money at cards. He was angry." Her voice broke. "It was worse than usual. I thought he might kill me, so I left." "You did the right thing." Will finished wrapping her wrist in a makeshift splint. "Do you have family? Somewhere you can go?" Clara shook her head. "My parents are dead. My brother is in California, but I have not heard from him in over a year. I have no money of my own. Thomas controls everything." The cowboys exchanged glances. Finally, Jake spoke up. "We are heading to Wyoming territory, taking cattle up to a ranch near Cheyenne. You could come with us if you want, get you out of here, somewhere your husband cannot find you." "I could not impose like that." "You would not be imposing," Will said firmly. "We would be honored to help you, and honestly, madam, if you stay here, what do you think will happen?" Clara knew exactly what would happen. Thomas would find her, drag her home, and beat her even worse for leaving. And eventually he would kill her. Maybe not on purpose, but one day he would hit her too hard, or push her down the stairs, or throw her against the wall with too much force, and that would be the end of Clara Winters. "I do not want to cause trouble for you," she said softly. "The only trouble would be leaving you here." Will's blue eyes met hers, and Clara saw nothing but sincerity in them. "Let us help you. Please." Clara took a shaky breath and nodded, "Thank you." The cowboys quickly set about making arrangements. They gave Clara blankets and a place to sleep in one of the supply wagons, and Will posted guards around the camp in case Thomas came looking. But the night passed quietly, and when morning came, the camp was already stirring with activity. Will brought Clara some breakfast and sat with her while she ate. In the morning light, she could see him more clearly. He was probably in his late 20s, with sun-weathered skin and calluses on his hands that spoke of hard work, but his eyes were kind. And when he smiled at her, Clara felt something stir in her chest that she had not felt in years. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Yeah." "Sore, but better than last night." Clara managed a small smile despite her split lip. "Thank you for helping me, all of you." "You do not need to keep thanking us. Any decent person would do the same." Will paused. "We are planning to move out this afternoon. Head north. Are you sure you want to come with us? Once we leave, there is no turning back." Clara thought about Thomas, about the little house that had become her prison, about the life of fear and pain that awaited her if she stayed. Then she looked at Will, at his honest eyes and gentle hands, and she thought about the possibility of something different. "I am sure," she said. They left St. Louis that afternoon, a long train of cattle and cowboys heading north. Clara rode in one of the supply wagons, and Will rode alongside, checking on her frequently. The other cowboys were respectful and kind, treating her like a lady despite her circumstances. As St. Louis disappeared behind them, Clara felt as if she could breathe fully for the first time in 2 years. The terror of what she had done, of leaving her husband and running away, was still there, but it was mixed with something else now: hope. The first few days of travel were hard. Clara's injuries ached with every bump and jostle of the wagon, and she was constantly exhausted, but Will was always there, making sure she had enough to eat, checking her bandages, talking to her about the landscape they were passing through. He told her about growing up on a ranch in Texas, about losing his parents to fever when he was 18, about learning the cattle trade and working his way up to trail boss. "I have been driving cattle for 8 years now," he said one evening as they sat by the campfire. "Seen a lot of country, met a lot of people, but I am getting tired of the wandering life. This is probably my last drive. After we get to Cheyenne, I'm thinking of settling down, maybe starting my own ranch." "That sounds nice," Clara said. "Having a place of your own, putting down roots." "What about you?" Will asked. "What do you want, Clara? After all this, what kind of life do you dream about?" No one had ever asked her that before. Thomas had never cared what she wanted. Clara thought about it carefully before answering. "I want to feel safe," she said finally. "I want to wake up in the morning without being afraid. I want to be able to make my own choices, even small ones like what to cook for dinner or whether to plant roses or vegetables in the garden. I want a life where I am treated like a person, not property." Will nodded slowly. "You deserve all of that. Every person does." As the days passed and they traveled farther north, Clara began to heal, both physically and emotionally. The bruises faded, her wrist slowly improved, and the constant fear that had lived in her chest for 2 years began to ease. She started to laugh again at Jake's stories, to enjoy the beauty of the prairie stretching endlessly around them, to look forward to Will's visits throughout the day. And Will, for his part, found himself drawn to Clara in ways he had not expected. She was beautiful, certainly, even with the fading bruises, but it was more than that. It was her quiet strength. The way she never complained despite her pain. The gentle kindness she showed to everyone in the camp. It was the way her face lit up when she saw a wildflower blooming or heard a bird singing. Thomas Winters had tried to break her spirit, but he had not succeeded. They were 2 weeks into the journey when they stopped to make camp near a river. Clara had been allowed to walk a bit that day, and she sat on a fallen log near the water, watching the sun set over the prairie. Will came to sit beside her, and for a while they just enjoyed the peaceful evening together. "Clara," Will said finally, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why did you marry him? Thomas, I mean. Did he always treat you that way?" Clara sighed. "No. When we were courting, he was charming, attentive. He said all the right things. My parents had just died, and I was alone and scared. Thomas seemed like a safe harbor." She paused. "But it changed after we married. Little things at first. He would get jealous if I talked to other men, even just in passing. He controlled where I went, what I wore. Then one day he grabbed my arm too hard and left bruises. He apologized, said it would never happen again, but it did. And it kept getting worse." "You know it was not your fault, right?" Will said gently. "Nothing you did or did not do caused him to treat you that way. That was his choice." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "Sometimes I wonder what I could have done differently. If I'd just been more careful, not made him angry." "No." Will's voice was firm. "Listen to me. Clara, you could have been perfect, and he still would have hurt you. Because the problem is not you, it is him. Men like that, they enjoy having power over someone weaker. They enjoy causing fear. You were trapped in an impossible situation, and you were incredibly brave to leave." Clara wiped her eyes. "I was terrified. Being brave does not mean you are not afraid. It means you do what you have to do anyway." Will hesitated, then reached over and gently touched her hand. "You never have to hide with me, Clara. Your scars, your fear, your past. You can be exactly who you are." Clara looked down at their hands, at Will's calloused fingers carefully covering hers. It was such a simple touch, but it held so much tenderness that it made her heart ache. "Why are you being so kind to me?" she whispered. Because you deserve kindness, and because I care about you. Will's voice was soft but steady. I know it is too soon, and I know you have been through hell, but I needed you to know that I care about you, Clara. Not in spite of what you have been through, but including all of it, every part of you. Clara felt something break open inside her chest, something that had been locked away and frozen for so long. She turned her hand over so their palms were touching and squeezed his fingers gently. I care about you too, she said. You make me feel safe. When I'm with you, I do not feel afraid. They sat together by the river as darkness fell, hands clasped, neither of them speaking. Words were not needed. Something had shifted between them, something profound and true, and they both felt it. Over the following weeks, Clara and Will grew closer. They talked for hours about everything and nothing. Will taught her about cattle and horses and the land they were passing through. Clara told him about her childhood, about learning to sew and cook from her mother, about the dream she had once had of opening a small dress shop. They laughed together, comfortable in each other's company in a way that felt natural and right. The other cowboys noticed, of course, but they approved. Jake told Will one night that he had never seen him so happy, and that Clara was a fine woman who deserved a good man after what she had been through. But it was not all easy. Clara still had nightmares about Thomas, waking up gasping and terrified. She flinched sometimes at sudden movements, even though Will was always careful to move slowly around her. And there was the matter of her marriage. She was still legally Thomas's wife, and that fact hung over them like a shadow. I do not know what to do about it, Clara confessed to Will one evening. They were sitting together after dinner, away from the others. I cannot get a divorce without money or proof, and even if I could, Thomas would never agree to it. We will figure it out, Will said. When we get to Cheyenne, we can talk to a lawyer. There must be a way. What if there is not? What if I'm tied to him forever? Will took her hand. Then we will find another way. Clara, I am not going anywhere. Whatever we have to face, we will face it together. Clara leaned against his shoulder, drawing strength from his presence. She had never imagined that someone could be so patient, so understanding. Thomas had always demanded, always taken, but Will gave freely, asking nothing in return except that she be herself. They crossed into Kansas, then Nebraska, the landscape changing as they traveled north. The heat of summer began to ease as autumn approached, and Clara no longer needed to wear long sleeves to hide her bruises. They had faded completely now, leaving only faint marks that would eventually disappear. But more than her physical wounds had healed, the emotional scars were taking longer, but with each day that passed, Clara felt stronger, more whole. One evening, as they made camp near a creek, Will approached Clara with something in his hands. I made this for you, he said almost shyly. It was a carved wooden bird small enough to fit in her palm, every feather delicately rendered. Clara stared at it in wonder. When did you make this? At night, after you went to sleep. I noticed you always seem happy when you see birds, so I thought. He trailed off, looking uncertain. Clara felt tears spring to her eyes, but they were good tears this time. It is beautiful, Will. The most beautiful thing anyone has ever given me. She stood on her toes and kissed his cheek, and Will's face flushed red. But he was smiling as he touched the spot where her lips had been. I am glad you like it. That night, Clara lay in her bedroll, holding the wooden bird and feeling her heart swell with emotion. She was falling in love with Will Barrett. She had been fighting it, telling herself it was too soon, that she was too damaged, that it could never work. But the truth was undeniable. She loved him, his kindness, his strength, his gentle hands and patient heart. She loved the way he looked at her like she was precious, the way he listened when she spoke, the way he made her feel safe and valued and seen. And she thought, based on the way he looked at her, that he might love her too. They were 3 weeks from Cheyenne when the storm hit. It came on suddenly, dark clouds rolling across the prairie with frightening speed. The cowboys worked quickly to secure the cattle and supplies, but the rain came down in sheets, and the wind howled like a living thing. Clara was helping to secure the wagons when a particularly strong gust of wind knocked her off her feet. She fell hard, crying out as she landed on her barely healed wrist. Immediately, Will was there, helping her up and pulling her toward one of the covered wagons. "Get inside," he shouted over the wind. "Stay dry, I will be back as soon as I can." Clara wanted to protest, to help, but she could see this was no ordinary storm. She climbed into the wagon and huddled under the canvas, listening to the thunder crash and the rain pound down. The storm lasted for hours, and Clara spent that time worrying about Will and the others out in the weather. When it finally passed, Will came to check on her, soaked to the skin but unhurt. Without thinking, Clara threw her arms around him, relief flooding through her. "I was so worried," she said into his wet shirt. "I am all right." Will held her close, and Clara could feel his heart beating steady and strong beneath her cheek. "We lost a few head of cattle, but everyone is safe. That is what matters." Clara pulled back slightly to look up at him. His hair was plastered to his head, and water dripped from his hat, but he was smiling down at her with such warmth that it took her breath away. "Will," she said softly, "I need to tell you something." "What is it?" "I love you." The words came out in a rush, but once she started, she could not stop. "I know it is too soon, and I know I'm still married, and everything is complicated, but I love you. You saved my life, and not just by helping me escape Thomas. You reminded me that I'm worth something, that I deserve to be treated with kindness. You make me feel like I can be myself, like I do not have to hide or pretend or be afraid. I love you, Will Barrett, and I needed you to know." For a moment, Will just stared at her, and Clara felt a flicker of fear. Had she said too much, scared him away? Then Will cupped her face in his hands, so gently, and smiled. "I love you too, Clara. I think I have loved you since that first night when you stumbled into our camp trying so hard to be brave even though you were terrified. You are the strongest, most beautiful woman I have ever met, and I love you with everything I have." He leaned down and kissed her, soft and careful, and Clara felt warmth spread through her entire body. This was nothing like Thomas's rough, demanding kisses. This was tender and sweet, full of promise and hope. Clara kissed him back, pouring all her love and gratitude into it, and Will held her like she was something precious and rare. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathless. Will rested his forehead against hers. "We will figure this out," he said. "The marriage, the legal issues, all of it. I promise you, Clara, we will find a way to be together properly, and until then, I am not going anywhere." "Neither am I," Clara whispered. The rest of the journey to Cheyenne passed in a blur of happiness. Clara and Will were together as much as possible, talking and laughing and stealing kisses when they thought no one was looking. The other cowboys tactfully pretended not to notice, though Jake winked at Will more than once. They reached Cheyenne in late September, when the aspens were turning gold and the air had a crisp bite to it. The town was bigger than St. Louis, bustling with miners and railroad workers and ranchers. Will delivered the cattle to the ranch that had hired him, collected his pay, and then set about finding a lawyer. The lawyer they found, Mr. Patterson, was an older gentleman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. He listened carefully as Clara told her story, nodding occasionally. "This is not uncommon, I am afraid," he said when she finished. "Many women find themselves in similar situations. Now, Missouri does allow divorce on the grounds of cruelty and abandonment. Since Mr. Winters was physically abusive and you have witnesses to your injuries, and since he has made no attempt to find you or bring you back, we have a case." "But I have no money," Clara said. "How can I afford to file for divorce?" "I will cover the costs," Will said immediately. Clara started to protest, but Will took her hand. "Let me do this, please." Mr. Patterson smiled. "Young man, I can see you care deeply for Mrs. Winters. That is good. She is going to need support through this process. Now it will take time. We will need to file papers, serve Mr. Winters with notice, wait for the court date. It could be 6 months or more. But it is possible, Clara asked. I could actually be free of him? Yes, Mrs. Winters, it is very possible. Clara felt tears of relief streaming down her face. Will wrapped his arm around her shoulders and pulled her close. They filed the papers that same day. Mr. Patterson would handle everything, serving Thomas with divorce papers citing cruelty and abandonment, and setting up the court date. In the meantime, Will found work at a ranch outside Cheyenne, and he found Clara a room at a respectable boarding house in town run by a widow named Mrs. Campbell. Mrs. Campbell was a round, cheerful woman who took an immediate liking to Clara. When Will explained the situation, leaving out the worst details but making it clear that Clara was escaping an abusive marriage, Mrs. Campbell immediately offered Clara room and board in exchange for help around the house. I could use an extra pair of hands, she said, and you look like a girl who could use a safe place to stay. We will get along just fine, I think. And they did. Clara threw herself into helping Mrs. Campbell, cooking and cleaning and tending the small garden behind the boarding house. The work was hard, but it was honest work, and Clara could make her own choices. If she wanted to plant roses, she planted roses. If she wanted to bake apple pie instead of cherry, she baked apple pie. These small freedoms meant more to her than she could express. Will came to visit every Sunday, his one day off from the ranch. They would walk together through town, talking and laughing, and Will would always bring Clara some small gift. A ribbon for her hair, a bag of peppermint candies, once a book of poetry that he had saved up to buy. Clara treasured every gift, but mostly she treasured the time with Will. Every moment with him was a reminder that love did not have to hurt, that a man could be strong without being cruel, that she deserved to be happy. The months passed slowly. Winter came to Wyoming, bringing snow and bitter cold. Clara and Will spent Sundays sitting by Mrs. Campbell's fire, drinking hot chocolate and reading together. Sometimes they talked about the future, about the ranch Will wanted to buy, about the life they could build together. But mostly they just enjoyed being together, taking things slowly, letting their love grow naturally. In February, Mr. Patterson sent word that the divorce hearing was scheduled for April. Thomas had been served with papers and had responded with angry threats, but he had not left Missouri to come after Clara. According to Mr. Patterson, Thomas had already found another woman to marry once the divorce was final, which would work in Clara's favor. It shows he has moved on and has no interest in reconciling, Mr. Patterson explained. The judge will see that. Clara felt sick at the thought of another woman suffering what she had suffered, but she pushed the feeling aside. She had warned Mr. Patterson about Thomas's violence, and he had promised to make sure it was on record. Beyond that, there was nothing she could do. She had to focus on her own freedom. April arrived with spring flowers and warmer weather. Clara traveled back to Missouri with Will beside her, both of them nervous about facing Thomas in court. But when the day came, Thomas did not even show up. He sent a lawyer who stated that Mr. Winters agreed to the divorce and would not contest it. The judge reviewed the evidence, including testimony from Will and Jake about Clara's injuries the night she had fled, and statements from Mrs. Campbell about Clara's continued trauma and healing. He asked Clara a few questions about the abuse, and she answered honestly, her voice shaking but clear. Then, after what felt like an eternity but was probably only 10 minutes, the judge granted the divorce. Mrs. Winters, you are hereby legally freed from your marriage to Thomas Winters, the judge said. I wish you all the best in your future. Clara walked out of that courthouse feeling like she was floating. She was free, truly, legally free. Thomas had no claim on her anymore. She could make her own choices, live her own life, be her own person. Will was waiting outside, and the moment he saw her face, he knew. He swept her up in his arms and spun her around, both of them laughing. You are free, Heger, he said, setting her down but keeping his arms around her. Clara, you are free. I am free, she repeated, and then she was crying and laughing at the same time. Will, I am free. They returned to Cheyenne the next day, and that evening, Will came to the boarding house with a serious expression on his face. Mrs. Campbell tactfully made herself scarce, and Will led Clara to the parlor. "I have been waiting for this moment," he said, taking both her hands in his. "Clara Winters, I love you with all my heart. You are the strongest, bravest, kindest woman I have ever known. Will you marry me? Will you be my wife and let me spend the rest of my life making you happy?" Clara's heart felt like it might burst. "Yes," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, Will, I will marry you. I love you so much." Will pulled out a simple gold ring, nothing fancy but beautiful in its simplicity. He slipped it onto Clara's finger, and it fit perfectly. They were married in May, in a small ceremony at the church in Cheyenne. Mrs. Campbell stood as Clara's witness, and Jake came in from the ranch to stand as Will's. Clara wore a new dress, pale blue with short sleeves, and she no longer felt the need to hide her arms. The faint scars from Thomas's abuse were still there, but they were just marks on her skin now, not sources of shame. Will had seen all of her, the broken and the healed, the scared and the strong, and he loved her completely. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Will kissed Clara with such tenderness that she felt her heart overflow. This was what marriage was supposed to be: partnership, love, mutual respect and care. After the wedding, they had dinner with Mrs. Campbell and Jake, and then Will took Clara to the small house he had been secretly building on the edge of town. It was modest but well-made, with 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, and a parlor with a large window looking out over the prairie. "I bought the land last month," Will explained as he showed her around. "I've been working on the house in my spare time. It is not much yet, but it is ours. I thought we could build our ranch here, raise cattle and horses, make a real home." Clara walked through the house, touching the walls Will had built with his own hands, looking out the windows at the land that would be theirs. In the kitchen, there were hooks on the wall for pots and pans and a small table with 2 chairs. In the bedroom, a quilt that Mrs. Campbell had made for them as a wedding gift was spread across the bed. "It is perfect," Clara said, turning to face Will. "Everything I could have dreamed of." That night, as they lay together in their own home, Clara felt a peace she had never known before. Will held her gently, his touch always asking, never demanding. He kissed her softly and told her he loved her, and when they came together as husband and wife, it was with tenderness and joy and love. Afterwards, Clara lay with her head on Will's chest, listening to his heartbeat. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For showing me what love is supposed to be, for being patient with me, for loving me even when I was broken." Will tightened his arms around her. "You were never broken, Clara. You were hurt, yes, but never broken, and I did not teach you what love is. You knew all along. You just needed someone to show you that you deserved it." Clara tilted her head up to kiss him. "I love you, Will Barrett." "I love you too, Clara Barrett." The months that followed were the happiest of Clara's life. She and Will worked together to build their ranch, starting with a small herd of cattle and a few horses. Clara planted a huge garden, both flowers and vegetables, and she spent her days working the land she now owned. Will was a patient teacher, showing her how to care for the animals and manage the ranch. They worked side by side from dawn to dusk, and in the evenings they would sit on their porch and watch the sun set over the prairie, hands clasped together. There were still hard days, times when Clara would be reminded of Thomas and feel fear creep in, but Will was always there, steady and calm, reminding her that she was safe, that she was loved, that she never had to hide who she was. Gradually, the bad days became fewer and farther between until Clara realized that she no longer woke up afraid. She woke up happy, eager to start the day with her husband by her side. In the spring of their second year together, Clara discovered she was pregnant. She was nervous at first, worried about how pregnancy and motherhood would change things, worried about whether she would be a good mother given what she had been through. But Will was overjoyed and supportive, and as her belly grew, Clara found herself becoming excited too. Their son was born in December, a healthy baby boy with Will's blue eyes and Clara's dark hair. They named him Samuel, after Will's father, And from the moment Clara held him in her arms, she knew a love deeper than anything she had experienced before. This was her child, hers and Will's, conceived in love and born into a home of safety and joy. Will was a devoted father, getting up with Samuel in the night, changing diapers without complaint, spending hours just holding his son and talking to him softly. Watching Will with Samuel, Clara fell in love with her husband all over again. 2 years later, they had a daughter, Elizabeth, who had Clara's eyes and Will's stubborn chin. Then another son, Thomas James, who they called Jamie to avoid any association with Clara's first husband. And finally, another daughter, Rose, who came when Clara was 35 and completed their family. As their children grew, Clara made sure they understood that their home was a place of love and safety. She taught them to be kind, to stand up for what was right, to respect themselves and others. Will taught them about the land and the animals, about hard work and integrity. Together they built a family grounded in love and mutual respect. The ranch prospered over the years. What had started as a small operation grew into one of the most successful ranches in the area. Will's reputation for honest dealing and quality cattle brought in steady business, and Clara's skill with horses added another source of income. They hired a few hands to help with the work, and Will made sure to treat them fairly, paying good wages and providing decent housing. Clara never forgot where she had come from, and she made it her mission to help other women who found themselves in situations like hers. She worked with the church in Cheyenne to set up a shelter for women escaping violent marriages, and she volunteered there regularly, talking to women who were where she had been, offering hope and practical help. Will supported her completely in this work, and more than once they took women in at the ranch until they could get on their feet. "You are saving lives," Will told her one evening after she had spent the day at the shelter. "You know that, right? Every woman you help, every life you change, that is a legacy worth leaving." Clara squeezed his hand. "I remember what it felt like to think there was no way out. If I can help even one woman find her way to freedom, then everything I went through will have meant something." The years passed quickly, marked by harvests and birthdays, hard work and celebration. Samuel grew tall and strong, with his father's easy confidence and his mother's gentle heart. He married a school teacher from Cheyenne, a smart, kind woman named Anna, and they gave Will and Clara their first grandchild. Elizabeth became a doctor, one of the first female physicians in Wyoming, and dedicated her life to helping others. Jamie took over running the ranch, showing a natural gift for the work, and Rose became a teacher, following in her sister-in-law's footsteps. Through it all, Will and Clara remained deeply in love. They still sat on their porch in the evenings, holding hands and watching the sun set. They still talked for hours about everything and nothing. They still kissed each other goodbye every morning and hello every evening. The passion of their early days had mellowed into something deeper and more lasting, a love that was woven into every aspect of their lives. One evening, when they were both in their 60s, they sat on their porch as usual, watching their grandchildren play in the yard. Will had gray streaking his dark hair now, and Clara's face showed the lines of a life well lived. But when they looked at each other, they still saw the people they had been that night long ago when Clara had stumbled into the cowboy camp, desperate and afraid. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if I had not wandered into your camp that night?" Clara asked. Will pulled her closer. "Every day. And every day, I thank God that you did. You changed my life, Clara. You gave me purpose and love and a family. You made me a better man." "You saved my life," Clara said, "in every way that matters. You showed me that I did not have to hide, that I was worth loving, that I deserved to be treated with kindness. You gave me everything, Will." "We gave each other everything," Will corrected gently. He lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it, "and I would do it all again, every moment, every challenge, just to end up here with you." Clara leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the deep contentment that came from a life lived fully and well. She thought about that scared young woman who had fled into the night so long ago, wearing long sleeves to hide the marks of abuse, certain she had no future. She wished she could tell that woman that everything would be all right, that she would find love and safety and happiness beyond her wildest dreams. But that woman had been braver than she knew. She had taken the terrifying step of running away, of choosing herself over the familiar misery of her marriage. And that bravery had led her to Will, to this life, to this love. You never have to hide, Will had told her that first night, and he had spent every day since then proving it true. Clara had learned to trust in his love, to believe in her own worth, to live fully and openly without fear. As the sun set over the prairie, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Clara felt overwhelmed with gratitude. She had survived what should have broken her. She had found love when she least expected it. She had built a family and a life that brought her joy every single day. The scars from her first marriage were still there, faint marks on her arms that never quite faded. But they were just scars now, reminders of what she had survived, not sources of shame. She turned her head and kissed Will's cheek. "I love you." "I love you too," Will said. "Always have, always will." Their grandchildren's laughter filled the evening air, and Clara smiled. This was her legacy, not just the ranch or the work she did helping other women, but this family, built on a foundation of love and respect and trust. Samuel was teaching his children about the cattle with the same patience Will had shown him. Elizabeth was home visiting between shifts at the hospital, her dedication to healing others a reflection of the values she had learned at home. Jamie was working with a new horse in the corral, his skill and gentleness with the animals something that always made Clara proud. And Rose was sitting on the steps with her youngest cousin on her lap, reading a story in that soft, clear voice that made her such an effective teacher. All of this, Clara thought, had started because a cowboy had seen a scared woman in need and had chosen to help. Because Will Barrett had seen past the bruises and the fear to the strong, worthy person underneath. Because he had told her she never had to hide, and then spent years proving it true. As full darkness fell, and the children were called inside for bed, Will and Clara remained on the porch a while longer. The stars were coming out, bright and countless in the Wyoming sky. "We should go in," Clara said eventually. "It is getting cold." "Just a few more minutes, will ye?" Will said. "I want to remember this moment. You, me, our family all together and happy. This is everything I ever wanted, Clara." "Me too," Clara said softly. "Me too." They sat together under the stars, two people who had found each other in the darkness and built a life full of light. Clara's journey from that terrified woman in St. Louis to this contented grandmother on a Wyoming ranch had been long and sometimes difficult, but every step had been worth it to arrive here, safe in the arms of a man who truly loved her, surrounded by the family they had built together. The bruises that had once marked her arms had faded decades ago. The fear that had once consumed her had been replaced by confidence and peace. The shame she had carried had been transformed into strength, and the long sleeves she had worn to hide her pain were long gone because she had nothing to hide anymore. Will had been right all those years ago. She never had to hide. Not her scars, not her past, not her pain, not her strength, not her love. With him, she could be completely herself, and that was not just enough. It was beautiful. As they finally stood to go inside, Will wrapped his arm around Clara's waist and she leaned into his embrace. After more than 30 years of marriage, his touch still made her feel safe and cherished. That, Clara thought, was the truest definition of love. Someone whose presence made you feel at home in your own skin. They walked into the house together, ready for whatever the future might bring, secure in the knowledge that they would face it side by side just as they always had. The door closed behind them, shutting out the night, and inside their home, warmth and light and love waited to embrace them. This was the life Clara had dreamed of during those dark days in St. Louis, a life of safety, of choice, of love. And it was more wonderful than she had ever imagined possible. The cowboy who had told her she never had to hide had kept his promise every single day, and Clara had learned to trust in that promise completely. As she prepared for bed that night, Clara caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror. Her hair was gray now, her face lined with age, but her eyes were bright and happy. She thought about that young woman who had fled into the night so long ago, and she felt a surge of pride. That woman had been so brave, even though she had not felt brave at the time. She had chosen survival over suffering, hope over despair, and in doing so, she had saved herself. Will came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, meeting her eyes in the mirror. "What are you thinking about, Issa?" he asked. "How lucky I am," Clara said. "How grateful I am for every single day we have had together." "I am the lucky one," Will said, kissing her temple. "You gave me everything, Clara, everything that matters." They climbed into bed together, and Clara settled into the familiar comfort of Will's embrace. This was her home, her safe harbor, her haven. This man, who had seen her at her most broken and loved her anyway, who had been patient when she needed patience and strong when she needed strength, who had built a life with her based on mutual respect and deep abiding love. "Good night, Will," she whispered. "Good night, my love," he replied. Clara closed her eyes, content and at peace. Tomorrow there would be work to do, grandchildren to spoil, perhaps a woman at the shelter who needed hope and guidance. But tonight there was just this: the warmth of her husband beside her, the safety of their home, the knowledge that she was loved completely for exactly who she was. She fell asleep with a smile on her face, dreaming of prairies and sunsets, of a young cowboy who had saved her life, of a love that had healed her wounds and shown her that happiness was not just possible, but inevitable when you opened your heart to it. The scars on her arms had faded to nothing more than whispers of the past, barely visible even in bright light. But the strength those experiences had forged remained. Clara had survived, thrived, and built something beautiful from the ashes of her old life. And she had done it because one cowboy had looked at a scared woman and seen someone worth saving, someone worth loving, someone who never had to hide again. Outside, the Wyoming wind swept across the prairie, rustling through the grass and carrying with it the promise of tomorrow. Inside the house, Will and Clara Barrett slept peacefully, surrounded by the fruits of their love, photographs of their children and grandchildren, walls built with Will's own hands, a home filled with decades of memories and laughter. This was their happily ever after, hard-won and well-deserved, and it was more precious because they both knew how easily it could have been otherwise. But fate and courage and love had brought them together, and nothing would ever tear them apart again. Years continued to pass in gentle rhythm at the Barrett Ranch. Will and Clara grew old together gracefully, their love deepening with each passing season. They watched their grandchildren grow and have children of their own, and the ranch that had started as a dream became a legacy that would last for generations. When Clara was 72, she stood in the shelter she had helped establish, talking to a young woman with bruises on her arms hidden beneath long sleeves despite the summer heat. The woman was afraid, ashamed, certain that her situation was hopeless. Clara sat down beside her and gently rolled up her own sleeves, showing the faint scars that remained. "I was where you are now," Clara said softly. "I know how impossible it seems, but I am here to tell you that there is hope. There is a way out, and you deserve so much better than what you are getting." The woman stared at Clara's scars, then at her face, seeing the peace and strength there. "How did you do it?" the woman whispered. "How did you get away?" "I ran," Clara said simply. "I gathered what courage I had, and I ran. And I was lucky enough to meet people who helped me, who showed me that not everyone wants to hurt me. My husband, Will, he told me something the night I met him that changed everything. He said I never had to hide, and he spent the rest of our lives proving that true. You think I could have that? Someone who loves me like that?" I think you deserve that, Clara corrected gently. But first, you have to choose yourself. You have to decide that you are worth saving, and then we can help you. There are people who care, who will support you, who will help you build a new life. The woman nodded slowly, tears streaming down her face. I want to leave him. I'm just so scared. Being scared is natural, Clara said, but you are stronger than you know. Let us help you. She reached out and squeezed the woman's hand, and in that moment, the circle was complete. Clara, who had been saved by a cowboy's kindness so many years ago, was now paying that kindness forward, helping another woman find her way to safety and freedom. When Clara returned to the ranch that evening, Will was waiting on the porch as always. His hair was white now, his face deeply lined, but his eyes were still the same clear blue that had captured her heart so long ago. How did it go? He asked as she climbed the steps. I think we helped her, Clara said, settling into her chair beside him. She's going to leave him. We will help her get somewhere safe, find work, start over. Will took her hand. You are remarkable, you know that. Clara laughed. I am just doing what someone once did for me, offering hope to someone who desperately needs it. That is exactly what makes you remarkable, Will said. They sat together in the evening light, hands clasped, watching the sun paint the sky in brilliant colors. After nearly 40 years of marriage, they still found peace in these quiet moments together. The ranch was running smoothly under Jamie's management. Their children and grandchildren were all healthy and happy, and Clara's work at the shelter was saving lives every day. Do you have any regrets? Will asked suddenly. Clara thought about it carefully. No, she said finally. I regret what Thomas did to me, but I do not regret my journey because it brought me to you. Everything I went through made me who I am, and it taught me to appreciate what we have, so no regrets. Good, Will said, because I would not change a single thing if it meant not having you in my life. As darkness fell, they went inside together, moving slowly now but still side by side. They prepared dinner together as they had done countless times before, moving around the kitchen in comfortable synchronicity. They ate while discussing their day, then cleaned up together before settling in the parlor to read. These simple domestic rituals had become sacred to them over the years. Every ordinary moment was precious because they both knew how easily it could have been otherwise. Clara could have died in that marriage, another woman lost to domestic violence her potential never realized. But instead she had found the courage to run, and she had found Will, and together they had built this beautiful life. Later, as they prepared for bed, Will helped Clara with the buttons on her dress, his fingers still gentle despite the arthritis that plagued them both. Clara turned and kissed him softly. Thank you, she said. For what? For everything, for saving me, for loving me, for building this life with me, for keeping your promise that I never had to hide. Will cupped her face in his weathered hands. Clara Barrett, you are the greatest gift of my life. Thank you for trusting me, for loving me, for being my partner in everything. I love you more today than I did yesterday, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today. That is impossible, Clara said with a smile. My love for you fills me completely. There's no room for more. Then we will just have to keep expanding, Will said, making her laugh. They climbed into bed and Clara nestled against Will's side, her head on his shoulder. This position had become more important as they aged, this physical closeness that reassured them both that they were together, that they were safe, that they were loved. Will? Clara said softly. Yes, my love? If I could go back and tell that scared young woman in St. Louis what her life would become, I do not think she would believe me. I certainly would not have believed that I could be this happy, this content, this loved. She was braver than she knew, Will said, and stronger. All of this was always in you, Clara. I just helped you see it. Clara closed her eyes, feeling the steady rise and fall of Will's breathing, the warmth of his body beside hers, the safety of his arms around her. This was love, real and lasting and true. Not the violent possession that Thomas had called love, but genuine partnership, mutual respect, deep, abiding affection. She drifted off to sleep, grateful beyond words for every moment of this precious life, for the cowboy who had told her she never had to hide and then spent decades proving it, for the family they had built together, for the love that had healed her wounds and shown her that happiness was not just a dream but a reality she could touch and hold and live every single day. And as she slept, she dreamed of prairies and sunsets, of a young cowboy with kind eyes and gentle hands, of a love story that had started in darkness but had blossomed into something beautiful and lasting and true. A love story that would continue long after they were gone, carried forward in the lives of their children and grandchildren, in the women Clara had helped, in the legacy of kindness and compassion they had built together. Will remained awake a little longer, holding his sleeping wife and thinking about the miraculous chain of events that had brought them together. If Clara had not run that night, if she had not stumbled into their camp, if he had not seen past her fear to the strong, worthy person underneath, their lives would have been completely different, empty, meaningless. But she had run, and he had helped, and they had fallen in love, and everything had unfolded exactly as it should. This life they had built together, this family, this love, was the greatest accomplishment of his life. More than the successful ranch, more than the respect he had earned in the community, more than anything else, this love was what mattered. "Thank you," he whispered to Clara's sleeping form, "for choosing to trust me, for building this life with me, for loving me. You made me the luckiest man alive." He pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead and then settled back against the pillows, still holding her close. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and joys, as every day did. But whatever came, they would face it together just as they always had. Outside, the stars wheeled across the Wyoming sky, constant and eternal. The prairie stretched endlessly in all directions, wild and beautiful and free. And inside the ranch house that Will had built with his own hands, two people who had found each other in the darkness slept peacefully, their love a beacon of light that would continue to shine for generations to come. This was their story, the cowboy and the woman who wore long sleeves to hide what had been done to her, who had found healing and love and happiness in each other's arms. It was a story of courage and redemption, of kindness and compassion, of love conquering fear and building something beautiful from brokenness. And it was a story with a happy ending, the kind that both of them had thought impossible once upon a time. But they had learned that happy endings were not impossible at all. They just required courage and faith and the willingness to trust in love even when everything said you should not. Clara had taken that leap of faith when she ran into the night. Will had taken it when he helped a stranger in need. And together they had built something extraordinary, a love that would last until their final breaths and beyond, carried forward in the hearts of everyone they touched. The wind whispered across the prairie, carrying with it the promise of tomorrow. And inside the house, Will and Clara Barrett slept on, secure in each other's love, grateful for every precious moment they had been given, at peace with the life they had built together. And when morning came, they would wake up side by side as they had done for nearly 40 years, ready to face whatever the day might bring, together, always together. Because that was what love meant. Not just passion or romance, though they had plenty of both, but partnership, commitment, choosing each other every single day, no matter what. That was the promise Will had made to Clara so long ago when he told her she never had to hide. And it was a promise he had kept faithfully, through good times and bad, through challenges and triumphs, through youth and old age. He had loved her completely, every part of her, the broken and the healed, the scared and the strong, the past and the present and the future. And Clara had done the same for him, loving him with all her heart, supporting him in his dreams, building a life with him based on mutual respect and deep affection. Together they had created something beautiful, something lasting, something worth celebrating. As the first light of dawn began to paint the eastern sky, Will stirred and tightened his arms around Clara. She murmured in her sleep and snuggled closer, and Will smiled. Another day, another blessing, another chance to love this woman who had changed his life in every possible way. He closed his eyes again, content to hold her a little longer before the demands of the day began. There was work to be done, as there always was on a ranch, but it could wait a few more minutes. Right now, all that mattered was this: the woman he loved safe in his arms, the life they had built together surrounding them, the knowledge that they had found something rare and precious and true. This was their happily ever after, hard-won and well-deserved, built on a foundation of love and trust and mutual respect. And it was everything either of them had ever wanted or needed. The sun rose over the prairie, flooding the land with golden light, and a new day began at the Barrett Ranch, full of promise and possibility, just like every day for the past 40 years. And Will and Clara Barrett faced it together, as they always had and always would, two hearts beating as one, two lives intertwined so completely that it was impossible to tell where one ended and the other began. This was love. This was home. This was forever. And somewhere in Cheyenne, a woman with bruises hidden beneath long sleeves was taking the first terrifying steps toward freedom, inspired by Clara's story, supported by the shelter Clara had helped establish, beginning her own journey toward healing and hope. The circle continued, kindness rippling outward, love multiplying, light pushing back darkness. And at the center of it all were Will and Clara Barrett, the cowboy and the woman he had saved, who had saved him right back, proving that love really could heal all wounds, and that happy endings were not just fairy tales but achievable realities for those brave enough to reach for them. Their story, which had begun on a dark night with fear and desperation, had transformed into something beautiful and lasting, a testament to the power of love and the resilience of the human spirit. And it would continue to inspire and give hope to others for generations to come, a reminder that no matter how dark things seemed, there was always light to be found if you were brave enough to look for it. Will and Clara Barrett had found that light in each other, and they had spent their lives sharing it with everyone around them, making the world a little brighter, a little kinder, a little more full of love. And that, in the end, was the greatest legacy anyone could leave behind.